Welcome back to the Smylie Show, and welcome back to the off season. That's not an off season, Smylie. We're entering real this league territory at this point. Of course, if you're listening to this podcast right now, I probably inserted some air horns here because there's yet another piece of breaking news, and this one is one that we've seen coming for, I guess, a couple days and maybe some weeks now. There have been rumors about this for a while, but Jon Rahm has officially departed for LIV. I guess in some senses I never thought I'd see it coming, but here we are and it's happened. I mean, just your thoughts?
I mean, professional golf is an absolute dumpster fire right now. It's just we are in a very, very tough little spot here, Charlie. I mean, oh gosh, I mean, there's so much to unpack here, and I know we're going to get into all the details with it, but man, it's just surprising in the fact that so much of what he's said in the past, just to be where we're at now, so much has had to happen. And I know we're going to get into some of the sound that Jon Rahm from his interviews that he has talked about over the last couple of years and where we're at today. I mean, I just kind of have to wonder what went wrong.
Yeah, no, and it's a really interesting development. That's a perfect setup, for what we have for you, where we want to start for this, because I think, we'll give you our thoughts at some point, but really it's interesting charting Rahm's evolution on this. And so where we're going to start is we're going to do kind of a timeline of sound here. We're going to start with that famous "I'm pledging my fealty to the PGA Tour" piece of sound, and then listen to just the way that Jon evolved maybe since then. That was back in February 2022. And then the last person we're going to hear from is from Jordan Spieth at the most recent Hero World Challenge, talking about what it would mean losing Jon Rahm. So let's begin here first with Jon Rahm. This is at the Genesis in February 2022.
This is my one and only time I'll talk about this, where I am officially declaring, let's say, my fealty to the PGA Tour. I'm a PAC member, and I have a lot of belief in Jay Monahan and the product that they're going to give us on the future. So I know there's been a lot of talk and speculation about the Saudi League. This is just not something I believe is the best for me and my future in golf. And I think the best legacy I can accomplish will be with the PGA Tour.
So you'll notice in that piece of sound there that it's not even referred to as the LIV League yet. That was still, months before it was going to be launched. So we will then fast forward a few months to after LIV was underway. This is at the 2022 U.S. Open.
I feel for Jay Monahan. If you see his time as a commissioner, he had to deal with COVID and now this. I don't know if he signed up for all this or not, but I consider the PGA Tour has done an amazing job giving us the best platform for us to perform. I do see the appeal that other people see towards the LIV Golf. I do see some of the, how do I put this delicately, points or arguments they can make towards why they prefer it. To be honest, part of the format is not really appealing to me. Shotgun 3 days to me is not a golf tournament, no cut. It's that simple. I want to play against the best in the world in a format that's been going on for hundreds of years, right? So that's what I want to see. And yeah, money is great, but when Kelly and I, this first thing happened, we started talking about it. We're like, will our lifestyle change if I got $400 million? No, it will not change one bit. Truth be told, I could retire right now with what I've made and I've lived a very happy life and not play golf again. So I've never really played the game of golf for monetary reasons. I play for the love of the game, and I want to play against the best in the world. I've always been interested in history and legacy, and right now the PGA Tour has that. There's a meaning when you win the Memorial Championship. There's a meaning when you win Arnold Palmer's event at Bay Hill. There's a meaning when you win LA, Torrey, some of these historic venues, and that to me matters a lot, right? I have, after winning this past U.S. Open, only me and Tiger have won at Torrey Pines, and we're both the golf course that we like, making putts on the 18th hole, right? That's a memory I'm going to have forever that not many people can say. So my heart is with the PGA Tour. That's all I can say. It's not my business or my character to judge anybody who thinks otherwise. And for a lot of people, I'm not going to lie, those next 3-4 years are worth basically their retirement plan they're giving them. It's a very nice compensation to then retire and sail off to the sunset. And if that's what you want, that's fine.
And here's another piece of sound from that 2022 U.S. Open.
I'm not surprised. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars are a pretty good damn reason for people to decide and go. And I see a lot of comments, disregarding it, but the high majority of the population, if they offered you $100 million or more for the next 4 years, a lot of people would go, right? So I'm not surprised at the amount of players that went. I don't know about the cloud. I think the events are spaced out just enough to where when the next one comes, we're going to have the same talk all over again, right? But I did watch a bit of the broadcast, and to me, the only thing they had to talk about is the fact that if Charles Schwartzel won, was going to make $4.7 million. Right? When I hear stories of Seve and great players in the past, yes, obviously financial stability is amazing, but when they talk about majors, or when Jack talks about the U.S. Open and winning the U.S. Open and winning the Open, it's more than just the money. Prices will always go up, and I consider I make plenty of money doing what I do, obviously, but nobody's talking about winning that event in London with the essence that some other events have, and that to me is what's attractive, being able to consider yourself champion of this with the history that comes with it. So I don't know. We'll see. I really can't tell you. Like I've said all along, I'm about as far away from this whole dynamic as can be. I go about my business. My job is to hit a golf ball to the hole as quick as I can, and that's about it, and that's where I stay. Can't really say much else on that.
So that's a wrap on the sound we'll play for you from 2022. This next cut is a week after the famous, or infamous, I guess, June 6th announcement of, at the time, what was phrased as a merger, but later clarified as a framework deal between the PGA Tour and the PIF. Here's Jon Rahm on whether he thinks the PGA Tour values player opinion.
I'm not sure I know how to answer to that. I think to an extent they value player opinion. They've certainly heard us throughout the whole process and in some of the issues. But we're certainly in a spot in time where there's a big question mark, right? Where we don't have the answers we would like, so it's hard to say.
And then here's another piece of sound. This is also at the U.S. Open in 2023 at LACC, and we're going to play a little excerpt of a cut here from something Jon said in that press conference.
And if things change, things change. I mean, I'm just... I'll have to adapt to the situation, and if I have to make some decisions on what's going on forward, I'll have to make some decisions. But it's just not. At the end of the day, I'm extremely privileged.
And then finally, as mentioned off the top, this is Jordan Spieth at the Hero World Challenge in December 2023, talking about just Jon Rahm's value to the PGA Tour.
I'm not sure specifically how it would impact those negotiations. But all in all, Jon Rahm is one of the biggest assets that we have on the PGA Tour. So it would be a really, really, really not very good for us in general, because we want to play against the best players in the world, and that's what Jon is. So I know there's been some guys that have talked to him. I know he's weighing some decisions, maybe not. I really don't know. So I don't want to insult him in saying he's weighing decisions if he already knows he's not or he is. But, that's somewhat out of my control in a way. But obviously I could speak for probably on behalf of 200-plus PGA Tour players in saying that we really hope that he's continuing with us.
So, Smylie, just reflecting on all that sound, I mean, you can really there are some bold statements made early on, and I think a 180 might not even be fully representative of the shift that you hear there. But just as you think about where Jon started and where he ended up, what do you take away from all that he said?
I mean, not terribly different than a lot of other players, maybe a little bit more warm to the idea of the LIV Golf Tour than maybe a couple other players have been so publicly about. I think of Rory as kind of the example of speaking up and being the player that was the spokesperson for the PGA Tour and its players. And The first thing that comes to my mind after listening to it was actually from the first clip. And he talked about being a PAC member and his loyalty to Jay Monahan and the PGA Tour.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you that don't know kind of what it means to be on the PAC or the player advisory board or the policy board, excuse me, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of investment, especially during COVID. You know, a lot of people give Jay Monahan a lot of grief about all of this that has happened with the framework agreement, but he did a masterful job to get the PGA Tour back up and running again during COVID. And I'm sure Jon Rahm was heavily involved in those conversations, getting the PGA Tour back going again and being one of the first professional sports playing again. So during all of that time, you know, being invested, and then all the LIV stuff starts to come out. And he's like, you know what, this is where I want to be. The history and legacy of the game, winning at Bay Hill, winning at Memorial. You know, he mentioned Tiger Woods being him, and those just Jon Rahm and Tiger Woods being the two guys that have won at Torrey Pines for both of those events. I mean, just he talks about that, and then he starts to shift a little bit, like, you know, right around that when that framework agreement came out, and started doing a little bit more of a 180 on, you know, the riding into the sunset quote that he kind of had about some of those players. Hopefully the 3 or 4 years that they play out there and their retirement money is great, because now he's thinking, you know what, there's, you know, everybody's kind of got a price. And so he backtracked on that a little bit. And listen, that June 6th date was not a good day for the PGA Tour. It very well could be a good day for the tour long term, and the fact that maybe all of these guys end up playing on the same tour one day again. But as far as it is concerned with Jon Rahm, it was a bad day. I think you could argue it may have been the day that you lost him. And I know that he's been adamant about staying, maybe not quite as much as he was, but when you lose the trust of the players and you feel like they aren't running the tour, and the PGA Tour is supposed to be a player's tour, and for a guy like Jon Rahm to invest the time that he has, and for a player that I've talked about last week is I think the most competitive PGA Tour player out there. I think he wants to win, and I think his legacy means a lot to him. So the calculations to get to where we're at now make you think that he's going to be playing competitive golf against the PGA Tour players again one day. It just doesn't make sense to me with his original quotes talking about the format, like would never go play three days, 54 holes in a shotgun start. Like that's not what a real championship is. So I don't know, Charlie, it's a lot to unpack there, but I think the last thing I'll leave you with there, and I'll let you kind of get a bat at it, is I think him going to the LIV Golf Tour, let's say they stay separate for a while. I think it's an opportunity for him to say, you know what? I am wanted over here at the LIV Golf Tour. They want this to be my tour. They want me to be the face. And I think the argument was maybe be pitched to him that at the PGA Tour, dude, this is never going to be your tour. It's Tiger's tour. It's Rory's tour. It's not your tour. And maybe that was what was in his ear, because you know what? For a player that is as talented as he is, and as if anybody ever asked me who the best player you ever played with is, I mean, dude, Rahm is on the short list. That's for 100% positive about that. The guy is undeniably unbelievable at golf, and it would be the biggest loss. And I think Jordan said it probably best. It's, you know, that's one of the PGA Tour's biggest assets right now is Jon Rahm, and losing him is a significant loss.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the competitive piece of this since you first really unpacked that. And I guess the last show we did, you know, with the rumors swirling around him and wondering what was going to happen. And I think if you look at the acquisitions LIV had in the past of a lot of really good players, and maybe the best player in terms of talent at the time was Cam Smith. And this is taking nothing away from Cam Smith. I mean, he's an incredibly talented player, you know, was probably top 5, maybe in top 3 in the world when he left, but it's just a different beast. Like Cam seems to want to play golf with fellow Aussies, want to play in Australia, which to his credit, the LIV Tour does. I mean, I think that maybe the most emotion we've ever seen out of Cam Smith was recently missing the cut at the Australian PGA Championship. You can tell how much that means to him. And fishing, and maybe playing a little good golf in there, and good for Cam Smith. But I mean, when you're talking about a guy that has Rahm's talent, but also Rahm's competitive drive, I mean, if you set the over-under on tournaments won on LIV next year with half the events, I'd probably take the over for Rahm. So I don't know what he's going to get there. I mean, there are obviously still good players there, and Brooks Koepka showed it to you last year, winning a major and was right there with Rahm at the end of the Masters. But I think that one was a hard one to try to kind of make sense of. But the more I think about it, it's of anybody in the whole world of golf, Rahm was probably best positioned to make this move at this time, because with the 2023 Masters win, he's exempt for majors for the next 5 years, and obviously the Masters for a lifetime. But he now has 20 cracks at it in the next 5 years to win another major, to extend his exemptions in these majors and keep playing in the tournaments that matter the most. And he also is third in the OWGR. So yes, he's going to lose ground there, but if he keeps winning tournaments, he can keep himself relevant regardless of what happens, with that whole points thing. But again, if he's in all those majors, like that OWGR thing is less of a consideration. So that's the only place I can really leave myself in terms of, why would Rahm do this from a competitive standpoint? The thing I'm curious to unpack more is, you kind of touched on Jay Monahan there a little bit. And it's so interesting listening to early Jon Rahm talking about what a great job Jay did and how well liked he seems to be by players. And, Rory McIlroy was the same way in terms of just, in lockstep with Jay on everything, supportive of what he was doing. I wonder if it's less about like what he has done and what he hasn't done, than what he hasn't done in the last whatever months or year or whatever. Because to me, it feels like there were numerous opportunities to kind of head this thing off at the pass, whether it was meeting with the Premier Golf League people, whether it was trying to make a good faith deal with the Saudi contingent and make something that worked. And now you're at a place where even these last couple months, it's flirting with these different private equity groups and saying, we're not so sure where the Saudi agreement is going to go. And so what does the PIF go and do and LIV go and do? They go grab the biggest bargaining chip off the table to make it come back. And open the door for other guys to go to and really force you. And now they have the kind of the upper hand, the leverage, and they can have more of a hand in shaping whatever this new thing is. What are your maybe your reflections on both Jay's role in this and just PGA Tour governance at large and the people kind of negotiating this, and also, what does the future golf landscape look like given that Jon Rahm's swinging this thing in LIV's direction and Piff's direction?
Yeah, no, you make a lot of great points. And I'll say that, we always knew that they had more money than us. And the model that the PGA Tour had is not sustainable. And they can't every year try to, the $20 million signature events, I don't see that as sustainable. So you understand it from a business standpoint and a financial standpoint about where the PGA Tour was and the longevity of what they had to do to keep up. So you get why the meeting was took with the Saudis to try to negotiate with the PIF for them to be a part of the PGA Tour. So you understand it, but it was all the messaging, and the messaging was probably the biggest mistake of it all, from Jay saying, you're never going to have to apologize to be on the PGA Tour. And you can't come back from your words. And that first interview I thought was one of the biggest misses in the entire deal was, I think it was up in Canada. Jay goes on with Nance and out comes all of the stuff about 9/11. And I'm like, oh, man, as a player, I guess I wasn't a player at the time, but a PGA Tour member, I was hoping he'd say, you know what? It's my job to figure out why these players are leaving. And it is my job to figure out what is the best environment for the PGA Tour. What is the best thing that we can do for these players? And that's what the messaging should have been at the time, instead of just a smear campaign against the Saudis and LIV. And I don't know who gave him that advice, but I guarantee that was probably one mistake that they look back on that Rory McIlroy probably still be on the policy board if it weren't for some of those mistakes that he then had to, he was carrying the torch, Charlie, for a long time. And eventually got to a point where he kept having to backtrack on things that he said because the landscape has changed so much from when we started to where we are now. And after hearing those clips, I mean, you have to wonder, does Jon Rahm think, this bargaining chip for the LIV Golf Tour, does this create some big global golf tour? But I would say one last part on this Jon Rahm bit is I think the PGA Tour, although it's doing a lot of really good work to try to restructure what it's going to look like as we head into this framework agreement, I think there was a lot of positivity around just everything for the future of the PGA Tour. And they kind of got caught with their pants down a little bit. You know what I mean? Just not being aligned from top to bottom. I think there was just a lot of uninformed players, and one of them being Jon Rahm. I think there's, Tiger Woods is informed. He's the one trying to right the ship here at the PGA Tour. Patrick Cantlay is informed. Adam Scott's informed. Charlie Hoffman and the rest of the policy board is informed. Now, was Jon Rahm in the loop on all this, on what was going on? You don't know, and I think you would hope that PGA Tour executives and the policy board would have the top players in the world in the loop on all this. You would think, right? And I think it was a great opportunity for the LIV Golf Tour to first off come with a great offer, which they did, and say, you know what, PGA Tour is a mess. LIV Golf Tour is not any better. Why don't I just take the money and hope that in one day all of this will merge?
Yeah, I think getting caught with your pants down is unfortunately a good way to summarize it, because I think it feels like the tour, at numerous levels made a series of bets that they lost every single time. It's that this thing is not going to come to fruition. Well, it did. They're not going to be able to get any good players. Well, they did. They're not going to be able to sustain it past like a year and a half without a TV contract. Well, they are. They're going to run out of, interest and money. And I think that the jury's still out on like whether or not LIV in its current form with its current business partnerships can live long term. But I tell you what makes that league a lot more marketable, having the number 3 player in the world and the reigning Masters champion in your stable of players. And
PGA.
And I'm not certain that he's the last guy, right? Like, I mean, I think that, and this is where I think it gets really interesting. And again, I laugh about this every time. It's like, we're nominally a golf podcast that had on like an antitrust law expert in the middle of this whole thing. And so here we're going to try to talk about like contractual details, like breaking down contracts. Like, I'd be really curious to know what the language of these contracts are for a guy like Jon Rahm, where it's, hey, we'll pay you, the numbers being reported, will pay you $550 million. But if we cut a deal with the PGA Tour in a couple of months and this all gets folded back together, like how much of that money is John guaranteed, and how much do the guys get to stay? And do you have a couple guys who are running out the door now thinking, "Ooh, let's get our big bag of cash," but then they have to hand it right back when they come back together? And how does it work in a new ecosystem? Like, let's say that because LIV and PIF now have the leverage in this thing, that they can force the LIV team concept back on whatever the new entity is. And then you have all these guys who are on LIV teams, and it's like, how does Scottie Scheffler get a make good? Is it like Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka and Jon Rahm bidding for his services and using some like newly injected sponsorship dollars now that it's all one big thing of PGA Tour sponsors who want to buy a team and say, yeah, we'll pay Scottie Scheffler $100 million to sign with the 4 Aces? I don't know. It's all, much like where we were in June 6th, there's just so much that's unanswered, but it's like your wheels start spinning on this stuff of like, where are we going to end up on this? And you got to think it's like flagship events, majors, of course, get saved. Maybe some main tour events get saved, but it feels more and more like we're going to have LIV as part of the team concept. And if we have LIV, like, does TGL still exist? What happens to the giant arenas they built down South Florida?
For me, I mean, in my head,
it's crazy. Like I just don't know what to, I don't know what to make of all of it. And I think where I end up on all this, and I think you feel the same way. It's like I just want to see all the players back together. Like even if whether or not I like LIV or the format or whatever, I'm okay with watching LIV as part of like my golf consumption schedule if it means that everybody's back together under the same roof or bubble and they're all competing together. We don't have to worry about these two kind of watered down products and trying to make sense of whether or not either of them is worth watching.
100%. Go look at the official world golf ranking right now. It's I said it last week. It feels like it's the FedEx Cup when I look at it. So I'm with you. Do I want to watch two different products? I mean, I already have to watch one for a living. Do I need to watch another one in my spare time? No, I don't have the time to watch it. All I do is
when are we going to play golf, Smylie? I mean, come on now, man.
Oh goodness. It's a lot. It's a big loss for the PGA Tour as you are heading into this negotiation period that was supposed to be done at December 31st. And you would hope that, if you're the PGA Tour, that the LIV Golf Tour would be acting in good faith and not trying to steal your players. But guess what? The bargaining chip has swung their way. And that is, to have, like you said, Cameron Smith, Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, and the list kind of goes on. They got some great players over there. It's just for the people that say that they're washed up over there, dude, stop it. There were so many unreal players on that golf tour.
I wonder I wonder a lot of things, but just kind of two additional items, at least for today's podcast, because I'm sure more and more information is going to come out on this, and we'll continue to react to this developing situation with Rahm and potentially others as we get more info. But I wonder where Tiger goes from here, and I wonder where Rory goes from here. And Rory feels like, I just don't know if you painted yourself in this corner so many times. Like, I think that the part of this that is so weird is if you're a fan of golf, you spend so much of your fanhood evaluating these players as golfers in a golf context, right? But then now it's like this whole other thing where you got to evaluate like a Rory McIlroy as a spokesperson or a Patrick Cantlay as like a businessman. And it's just kind of hard for the brain to compute, where they all stand on these things. But I feel like Rory has so many times said, I'm okay with Saudi money. I'm okay with team golf, but I'm never going to be okay with LIV. That if this thing happens, I don't know how, I don't know what part he takes in it, and I also wonder on Tiger, where you think, if, seeing that Rahm is gone, does this play into his hand? Like, I'm not sure where Tiger stands in these negotiations, if he was leaning towards private equity or what else, but like, does this help him, create a sense of urgency? Because he was so adamant about that December 31st deadline. Does it help him say, guys, we need to get this done. Let's go do it. I don't know.
I think things got way more complicated. I think if it was, let's say Jon Rahm stayed on the PGA Tour, I think this thing had a chance to get done at the end of the year. I thought it still wouldn't. I thought it would get pushed back a little bit, but it would be close, more so like January, February, they'd get it figured out. But man, this just seems like it's going to push it back even further because I don't see how these two sides are agreeing right now. To me, they're working in silence against each other, and they're trying to figure out how to get in a position of power to be able to outlast the other.
Well, that's all for our recap of the latest bombshell news story in the world of golf, which is, of course, Jon Rahm going to LIV. We're going to have more on this topic in the coming days as more information comes out. We appreciate you watching and listening, and we will be back here to talk to you soon.
I've actually watched a couple of episodes of y'all earlier. It just started popping up on my YouTube, so I was like, I'll check it out. And you guys have some good takes, so thanks for what you guys do. So I'm happy to come on. And
that is a stamp of approval from Mr. Victor Hovland.